There's a moment in Zootopia, about 20 minutes in, when Judy Hopps walks through the frozen streets of Tundratown. Two little elephants skate past her in matching dresses. You've probably seen this movie 4 or 5 times and never looked at them twice. But those two elephants are the loose thread that unravels the entire film. Tundratown is the city's Arctic district. Snow banked against the curbs, ice sculptures on the corners, and an architectural style the artists borrowed from Slavic onion domes, which is why the skyline looks a bit like Moscow wearing a winter coat. And gliding through all of it, holding hands with their dad, are two young elephants in gowns. Look closer. One is wearing pale blue and lavender with a snowflake pattern running through it. The other is in a black bodice with a teal skirt and rose-colored trim. That's Elsa. That's Anna. Two elephant kids cosplaying the Frozen sisters at a public ice rink, in a movie that arrived barely 2 years after Frozen took over the entire planet. And their father? Look at his sweater, his suspenders, that whole cozy ski lodge situation. He's dressed as Oaken, the shopkeeper who runs the trading post and sauna in Frozen. It's a complete family gag buried in a background crowd shot that's on screen for about 2 seconds. That's the entry point. Because once you know Disney's artists were smuggling Frozen into Zootopia, you start seeing it in places nobody was ever meant to look. Go back to the opening act, when Judy walks into Jumbo's cafe. It's the Elephant Run ice cream parlor, the one where Nick Wilde runs the Jumbo pop hustle that starts their whole relationship. Behind the counter, up on a shelf, there are 2 decorative plates. The floral emblem painted on those plates is the exact ornamental pattern that appears on the headboard of Anna's bed in Frozen. Nobody in a theater is catching that. Nobody is supposed to. It exists for the artist who painted it and for whoever eventually freeze frames hard enough to find it. And the owner of that shop has a name. He's credited as Jerry Jumbo Jr., which is a nod to a much older Disney elephant because Dumbo's real name, the one his mother gives him before the crowd starts laughing, is Jumbo Jr. Now here's where the movie stops being subtle about it. Judy's first real foot chase is against a weasel who robs a shop of flower bulbs. When she finally pins him, she calls him Weaselton. He corrects her immediately. It's Weaselton, Duke Weaselton. If that exchange gives you a strange sense of déjà vu, good. In Frozen, Elsa's petty little antagonist is the Duke of Weaselton, and the running joke is that everyone keeps calling him the Duke of Weaseltown, which sends him into a rage every single time. Same joke, flipped inside out. And Disney went one better by hiring Alan Tudyk to voice both characters, so the weasel in Zootopia is getting annoyed about his name in the exact same voice that was annoyed about it in Frozen. Later, Judy and Nick corner Duke at his street stall, and this is the shot people rewind. He's selling bootleg DVDs, and every cover is an animal version of a Disney movie. There's Wrangled, featuring a long-haired stallion in Rapunzel's dress, which is essentially Maximus the horse doing Rapunzel. There's Wreck-It Rhino. There's Pig Hero 6 with a Baymax made of pork. Then there's the second table, and this is the good one. Moana, with a cat sailing a catamaran for a film that would not reach theaters for another 8 months. Floats in 2, starring a moose and 2 otters, for a sequel that was still more than 3 years away. And Giraffic, a squirrel bravely climbing a giraffe's neck into the clouds, standing in for Gigantic, a Disney project that was eventually canceled and never came out at all. Duke even brags that he's got movies that haven't been released yet. He isn't lying, which brings us to the smallest neighborhood in the city. Little Rodentia is the district built for mice, shrews, gerbils, and lemmings, and the production actually put a number on it. The whole town, skyscrapers included, stands 21 inches tall, less than 2 feet. Co-director Rich Moore described it as Greenwich Village shrunk down, which is exactly why those streets have that crooked, brownstone old New York charm, instead of just looking like a dollhouse. The signage is where the jokes live. There's a department store called Target, and another called Mousie's, standing in for Target and Macy's. There's a bakery called Hans's Pastry Shop, named after the prince who turns out to be the actual villain of Frozen, which is either a compliment or an insult, depending on how you feel about his croissants. And tucked in right beside Mousie's, there's a restaurant called the Lucky Cat Cafe. That is not a generic name. That is the exact cafe Aunt Cass runs in San Francisco in Big Hero 6, apparently franchised into a rodent city, presumably staffed by cats. The mind reels slightly. Then Judy hauls the giant donut sign off the roof of the big donut and drops it over Duke like a ring toss, which is a very old cartoon move lifted straight from Lard Lad in The Simpsons. And the shrew Judy saves during that chase turns out to matter enormously because her father is Mr. Big, the crime boss of Tundratown. Now everybody clocks that Mr. Big is doing a Godfather bit. What people underrate is how precisely the film commits to it. The dim study, the wall of loyal muscle, the kiss on the ring. The daughter's wedding running in the background while business gets handled in a side room. His clothing and even his facial structure are modeled on Vito Corleone, and Maurice LaMarche plays him with a rasp that lands somewhere between Marlon Brando and a man who has smoked for 300 years, which is a lot of menace for an Arctic shrew you could lose in a coat pocket. The joke works because the film plays it absolutely straight. Nobody in the scene finds it funny that the most feared mammal in the district is the size of a walnut. That Big Hero 6 connection isn't a one-off either. Look at the calendar hanging on the wall in Chief Bogo's office. The photograph on it is the San Francisco skyline. Look at Finnick's van, the one Nick uses to run the popsicle operation. There's an antenna topper on it, and that antenna topper is Baymax. On the side panel of the same van, there's a painted fish hook, and it's Maui's fish hook from Moana, which, again, was a movie nobody outside the studio had seen yet. But the best version of this runs backwards. In 2014, 2 years before Zootopia hit theaters, Big Hero 6 came out. In it, Honey Lemon carries a phone with a cartoon animal on the case. Art director Scott Watanabe has explained that the case started out as a bear design, that they kept finding similar artwork in their research, and that he went hunting for a different animal. He landed on a fox and a necktie, because Zootopia was in production down the hall and Nick Wilde was already on his mind. So Nick Wilde was hiding inside a Disney movie 2 years before he had one of his own. And then there are the Mickeys, because there are always Mickeys. Look at Officer Clawhauser, the cheetah working the front desk with a face made entirely of spots. One of the spots on his right cheek is shaped like Mickey Mouse's head, 2 ears and everything. It's sitting there in every single close-up he has. Watch him a little longer and he's eating cereal. And floating in the bowl is a Mickey Mouse marshmallow. There's another one in a street scene. While Nick is pushing Finnick along the sidewalk in a stroller during the popsicle scam, a hippo walks past pushing a stroller of her own, and hanging out of the basket underneath is a Mickey Mouse doll. The Mystic Springs Oasis gets its own set. That's the Naturalist Club where Yaks the Yak explains, at great length, that nobody is wearing clothes. Look past the yoga and there's a lamp sitting on a desk in there, and it's Genie's lamp from Aladdin. There's also a bear scratching his back against a tree in a pose that any Jungle Book fan will recognize instantly as Baloo. Now let's talk about what you were hearing. Before Judy ever reaches the city, the train rolls past the sign for her hometown, and there's a population counter at the bottom of it. Watch it for a couple of seconds. The number is quietly ticking upward the entire time the shot is on screen, because Bunnyboro is a town full of rabbits, and the film is not going to explain that joke to you. Judy's mother mentions in passing that Judy has 275 brothers and sisters, and the whole family fills an entire train platform to see her off. On that ride into the city, Judy is scrolling a music player that looks suspiciously like an old iPod Nano, and the library is a wall of animal puns. The Beagles, Fleetwood Yak, Fur Fighters, Guns N' Rodents, Kaneen West, Hyena Gomez, Mick Jaguar, Katy Perry, Destiny's Cub, Iwe 2. And then there's Gazelle, the superstar voiced by Shakira, whose album on that same little screen includes a track called Let It Goat. Also part of Your Wool, and Era Bunny Nights, which are The Little Mermaid and Aladdin getting the same treatment, which sets up a payoff almost everyone hears and almost nobody registers. Later, when Chief Bogo is systematically crushing Judy's spirit in the bullpen, he tells her that life isn't some cartoon musical where you sing a little song and your insipid dreams magically come true. And then he closes the sentence with 3 very specific words. So let it go. He's not reaching for a turn of phrase. He's quoting a song that genuinely exists in his universe, one that's sitting on his own officer's music player right now. And Idris Elba delivers the whole thing completely deadpan. There's one more hiding in the signage. When Nick sells his popsicles to that crowd of tiny office workers streaming out of a bank after a long shift, the animals are lemmings, and the bank is called Lemming Brothers. Say that one out loud and you'll get there. Now, everything so far has been Disney winking at Disney. The next layer is a different thing entirely, because this is the crew winking at themselves. While Zootopia was in production, the Walt Disney Animation Studios building in Burbank went under renovation, so a big chunk of the team got relocated to an off-site warehouse in North Hollywood on Tujunga Avenue. By every account, it was not glamorous. Leaky plumbing, a junkyard next door, the full experience of being temporarily evicted from the castle, so they put it in the movie. When Judy and Nick drive into the rainforest district hunting for manchas, there's a street sign in frame that reads Tujunga and Vine. Co-director Jared Bush has said that's his favorite Easter egg in the entire film, precisely because it isn't for the audience. It's for every single person who spent 2 years working out of that warehouse. And they didn't stop there. Later in the film, when Bellwether pulls up the traffic camera system to help Judy find footage, there are coordinates on those monitors. Those coordinates are real. Type them in and they land on 4 actual places in the Los Angeles area. The Disney Animation Building in Burbank, the Tujunga Warehouse in North Hollywood, a movie theater in Burbank where the crew would have sat through their own screenings, and a taqueria in North Hollywood called Salsa and Beer, somewhere in the surveillance grid of a fictional animal metropolis. There are working GPS coordinates pointing directly at the restaurant where the animators ate lunch, which brings us to the detail that has been standing in front of you the whole time, in plain view, quietly telling you the ending. Assistant Mayor Dawn Bellwether wears a small bell on a chain around her neck, every scene, from her very first appearance. A bellwether is a real word, and it's older than you'd think. It comes out of Middle English, and it describes the one sheep in a flock that gets a bell hung around its neck so the shepherd can hear where the herd is heading. The bellwether leads. Everyone else follows the sound. The film's creative team has said outright that this is why they chose the name, and that they added the bell to her character design deliberately. Her surname is a job description. She is the one who makes the flock move, and she spends 2 entire acts performing the exact opposite. Overlooked, talked over, apologizing, absorbing Lionheart's abuse with a nervous little smile while the audience quietly files her under harmless. Meanwhile, the design team has hung the answer around her throat and let her walk through every scene wearing it. The Night Howler operation has a whole layer of its own. Doug the Ram runs his chemistry out of an abandoned subway car parked in an old rail yard. He wears a respirator and a yellow protective jacket. He cooks a vividly colored serum and loads it into pellets. And halfway through the scene, 2 rams turn up to deliver his coffee, and their names are Walter and Jesse. That's Walter and Jesse. That's Breaking Bad. The mobile lab hidden inside a vehicle nobody's supposed to find is the RV. Doug even says their names into the phone right before they walk in, which means Disney put a Breaking Bad homage into a film aimed at 6-year-olds and walked away clean. One more thing on that train car. Painted on the outside of it is a rabbit. Long ears, black and white, deliberately old-fashioned. That's Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, the character Walt Disney created in the 1920s and then lost the rights to. And losing Oswald is the exact thing that pushed him into inventing Mickey Mouse. Disney only won Oswald back in 2006. And there he is, riding on the side of the villain's laboratory, saying nothing. The names are doing overtime all over this movie. The missing otter whose case kicks off the entire plot is Emmett Otterton. That's a nod to Emmett Otter, the banjo-playing hero of Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, the Jim Henson special that a whole generation grew up watching every December. The sloth at the Department of Mammal Vehicles is Flash Slothmore, and the joke everybody remembers is how long he takes to do literally anything. The joke almost nobody catches lands near the end of the film when Judy and Nick pull over a street racer tearing through Savannah Central. The license plate on that car reads FSTNML Fast Animal with the vowels stripped out, and when the window rolls down, the driver is Flash. Also worth noticing, Flash works on a touchscreen, not a mouse, because a sloth would never survive a double click. Here's one that depends entirely on where you were sitting when you watch this. Late in the film, the Zootopia news network cuts into the story with 2 anchors. One is a snow leopard named Fabienne Growley. The other one changes depending on your country. In the United States and Canada, it's a moose named Peter Moosebridge, voiced by Peter Mansbridge, who anchored Canada's national news for decades. Watch it in Australia or New Zealand, and he's a koala named David Koalabell. In Brazil, he's a jaguar. In Japan, he's a tanuki. In China, he's a giant panda. Disney animated separate newsreaders for separate territories and cast local broadcasters to play them, so audiences everywhere would see a familiar face reading the news in an animal city. Which means there is genuinely a version of Zootopia you have never watched. So the real question is why? Why is one animated film this obsessively layered? The answer is that the Zootopia you know is the second attempt. The original version was much darker, and Nick Wilde was the lead. In that story, predators were a distrusted minority forced by law to wear tame collars, devices that shocked them whenever they felt anger, fear, or excitement. Nick was building an underground park called Wild Times where predators could take the collars off and just exist for a while. Judy was the hardened cop sent to shut him down. They built it, they boarded it. There's even a screen test of Nick's face the first time his collar comes off. Then it fell apart. Byron Howard has said the problem was that they had created a world so unjust that nobody wanted to be in it, and no audience wanted to save it. Colleagues at Pixar looked at the tame collars and disliked the whole idea, and it left the team with roughly 17 months to rebuild a film from the ground up, throw out the collars, hand the story to Judy, and make Zootopia somewhere worth fighting for. Everything you've watched in this video comes out of that scramble. 64 species. 18 months of research at Disney's Animal Kingdom, the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, and out in Kenya watching how animals actually share space. New fur software called iGroom, built because the old tools simply could not handle it, giving Judy and Nick around 2.5 million individual hairs each and a giraffe about 9 million. A city assembled out of pieces of New York, Las Vegas, Paris, San Francisco, Hong Kong, and Brasilia. When you rebuild a world that fast, with that many artists, every one of them leaves fingerprints. The plates on the shelf, the bell on the chain, the street sign with their own miserable warehouse on it. So the next time you put Zootopia on, watch the background instead of the characters. Read the shop signs. Check the license plates. There are hundreds of people hiding in that city, and they left the door open on purpose.